Hi, I'm Anissa.
Hi, I'm Mona.
Hi, I'm Tarie.
And I'm Sophie Hannah, and I want to welcome you to episode 58 of Ethnically Speaking, the show where we discuss everything affecting the UK's highly melanated communities, from current affairs to pop culture and everything in between. Now, you know we always keep it 100, and we're going to do the same this week as we talk about tackling growing levels of abuse on social media. Last week, model and cookbook author Chrissy Teigen deleted her Twitter account after 10 years, saying that it no longer serves her positively as much as it serves her negatively. Now, Teigen has frequently encountered bullying and trolling on the platform, and she's not the only one. A recent documentary that was released on Channel 4 about the life of Caroline Flack, the TV presenter, exposed the social media harassment that she experienced and how that played a role in her tragic suicide last year. Now, in a world when #BeKind is constantly trending but never fully taken up, do we need to take more responsibility for protecting our mental well-being and therefore disconnecting from social media? Or should social media companies be taking more responsibility in terms of policing the bad behavior that is happening on their platforms? And if so, what can they and could they be doing?
Well, honestly, I'm of the opinion that it should be both. So we should be taking more steps to safeguard our mental health. But at the same time, because of the ever increasing prevalence of social media in our lives and how much more it is part of our daily functionings and our professional functionings and even our personal and interpersonal functionings, it's kind of also um, on social media platforms themselves to also do a better job of safeguarding against harassment and actually sticking to their community guidelines and actually upholding their terms of service. I mean, even just recently with Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, those three are big offenders with regard to very selectively enforcing their community guidelines. So for instance, on YouTube, you're never more than 3 clicks away from an alt-right, racist or homophobic content maker, and they deliberately do that, and it incentivizes these people, and they regularly make all of these horrible, like, racist videos and everything else, and engage in the harassment of other content creators and other YouTubers. And then when those YouTubers complain and everything else, nothing gets done. And even with Twitter, it wasn't until Donald Trump lost the election that they finally decided, hey, do you know what? Maybe we should actually consider getting rid of his Twitter account, because we've only just now decided that actually this violates all of the terms of service and all of the community guidelines that we've set up that everybody else must abide. But he could just merrily slide on through and harass whoever, whenever, however, without any kind of recourse, no matter how much anybody complained. And then Facebook is my, well, not my favorite offender, but Facebook is particularly, shall we say, cheeky, in the sense of, well, no, not cheeky, that trivializes it, but rather, Facebook has a habit of leaving up the abuse that people will spew at an individual. But when that individual who is the target of the abuse actually does a screenshot of it and posts it up and says, hey, this is the abuse I'm getting, Facebook will take the complaint down, will take that person's post down and say, oh, well, this violates community guidelines. And then it's like, oh, excuse me, but the person hurling all of this nasty abuse at me doesn't violate the guidelines. You're not doing anything about this person or persons who are harassing me so vociferously. So yeah, in as much as we should all take care and step back whenever we want to and refresh our mental health and take care of ourselves, these large platforms also need to take responsibility for the maintenance of their platforms, because we all use them.
I would say that I agree with Tarie mostly. I think there's almost like a joint onus in this situation. One that, like, it's your mental health, so you have to obviously take it as priority number one and have to make sure you almost safeguard yourself is the best way to say it. But I also think because you are like coming onto somebody else's platform and community, they also have a responsibility to its users. So it's kind of like a dual thing here, where it's kind of like everybody plays a part in this to kind of just make sure that the social media platforms we are interacting in is a safe space for everyone. I was reading actually that I think they introduced it last year, and I don't think it's completely passed yet, but they've started working on legislation in Australia to actually like double down on all the trolling and abuse, and especially for platforms such as Facebook and Twitter. And I actually thought it was quite good because when I was reading the article, they were talking about, I don't know if when you guys usually have conversations about this nature, but a lot of people will always give you reasons of how you as maybe like the victim of online abuse or trolling, all the ways that you can cope with it versus like all the ways that you should actually punish the people that are actually doing it. And so what I found was great with the Australian legislation, their focus was simply on punishing these perpetrators. So people that were intimidating people, bullying people, revenge porn, bullying children, would now encounter a fine, and that companies, social media platforms who did not take down these abusive posts or who didn't reveal the identities of these perpetrators were also going to be fined as well. So I like how Australia basically was like, okay, you as the individual, I'm going to police you, but you as the corporation, I'm also going to police you. And I think that would serve well throughout the rest of the world, not just Australia. And I think that might help everyone in the part, one, protect their mental health, but also allow the companies to do their part in protecting their mental health as well.
I think I agree with what you're saying, Anissa, about the legislation that Australia is putting into play. One of the things for me is that when we pose the question of do we take responsibility for our own well-being, our own mental well-being, and then just simply disconnect from social media, that always rubs me up the wrong way, because I don't actually think that people look at social media for what it's actually intended for. Now, this isn't me hopping on a conspiracy theory. This is genuinely my beliefs in the fact that social media is more than just about posting pictures, connecting with old friends, and social networking. Social media is actually a really big monster, and a lot of the things that social media is built behind is very addictive. Now, if we look at some of the ways that people are towards social media, I've heard crazy things like people check their phone. So 90% of our phones is used for social media apps, and we look at our phones about 160 times a day. That's very, very addictive. Even for me, when I've tried to say to myself, okay, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to limit my time that I use on my phone. It is incredibly hard. Now, I've never been addicted to drugs. I don't drink alcohol, I'm not an alcoholic, but I can tell you the withdrawal symptoms that I've had when I've actually sat down and reflected and given it some thought, it's been really, really hard. So to say to the public, okay, well, if you feel that, you're being victims to trolls or hurls of abuse, simply just disconnect from social media. Social media was not built to just be simply disconnected from. It's addictive. The endorphins that people get from the likes and the comments. And when you look into the negative side of social media, you could see 100 positive comments and see one negative comment, and it just spirals and takes you down a really dark, dangerous road. Now, not only do I think that, yes, these social media companies should be held responsible, this is me kind of going off here, we need to think about how we interact with social media and what they are doing to the service users. Because if there's an app that is deliberately being addictive and I am having a negative experience with that app, how the hell am I supposed to disconnect from the app? It's so simple to say, oh, well, if you've seen a bad comment, delete it, or, just block it or limit your use on the phone. It's easier said than done. It's really, really hard. And I think those are some of the conversations that we need to start having as well.
Oh, you're so right about that. Because even just thinking about this subject, I had to think about my interaction with social media. And I think being in a pandemic, being homebound, I've definitely seen probably my interaction with social media probably go a lot higher than it probably normally would if I'm able to go out and experience the world. And I think for me, social media is, for me personally, it's just a place where I compare myself a lot. Let me talk about Instagram. That's my social media drug of choice. So literally, and I compare myself about the way I look. Am I successful enough? Have I gotten further enough at this stage in my life? Shouldn't I be further along? And it can really be a breeding ground for that in terms of me. So I've had to disconnect from social media this week and just been like, do you know what? I just need like a little breaker to just kind of take my mind out of this carefully curated world, like seeing people on lives. And I love watching lives on like Instagram, but I'm like, are people like that all the time? Like, are they always up? Are they always peppy? Or are there times that they're not showing? Like, I just feel like it can be very difficult to, I think what the mind wants to see, what the mind sees, it really believes. Like, our minds aren't really programmed to see a picture and think that it's fake, or, you know, to see what someone says as reality and then to question it. But it's something that we have to do when we see social media, even though I don't believe that's our natural inclination. So I think there is definitely an onus that we need to take on protecting ourselves from social media. But as Mona said, it's really, really difficult. And I think I've really changed my mind on how much the companies or the platforms have, because I think originally I thought, no, I mean, they do, but they can't police everybody. But these are people that are managing algorithms in hundreds of countries, staff, like thousands of staff around the world who are so up on technology, but yet they can't seem to stop people experiencing abuse online, but yet they can follow certain other things and the trends and what's hot and what's new and be updating the platform daily. So I think some work needs to be done, and it's going to take people like Chrissy Teigen coming off Twitter. Thierry Henry has deactivated all of his social media accounts as well until he says that they start to tackle racism properly. So unfortunately, maybe it's going to take big, famous, key players with millions of viewers who now these platforms are unable to advertise to, for them to start to think, okay, it's affecting us. We need to start protecting people more.
But just to circle back to something that Mona said about social media being a monster, like, I could be, you know, really, what's the word? Pessimistic. I don't even, if that's the right one I'm looking for. Is maybe, don't you think it might be too much of a monster at this point for even these companies to get any kind of control? Like, that's what I'm just thinking, because Sophie, I was kind of like you on the point where it's like, can they police everything? But then at the same time, I do believe that they need to have an onus on certain things. But I'm still of the perspective of, you know, not everyone can see everything, and they could have 1 million employees working 24 hours a day, and I still don't feel like they would catch absolutely everything. And so then that's why I was like of the joint thought that we also need to take a bit of an onus, and maybe not us, because we're not trollers. At least I hope no one on this call's a troller. So we wouldn't go out there and use social media to be abusive to another person. But it's like, as much as I want them to take much more responsibility, I'm just thinking to myself, is it naive to make me to think that they could take all responsibility? Do you know what I mean?
No,
like,
I agree with you.
I
don't think they can take all responsibility, to be honest.
Yeah.
Bonnie, honestly. So I think Pandora's out of the box. And because I think the way that social media was set up, no one knew it was going to take off like this. Like, they probably thought somewhere in Silicon Valley that this is a really great idea, but no one knew. Because Facebook was started to be for university students. And then it expanded from one university to various universities, and then they expanded it to the entire world. So these things I don't know if we thought it was going to expand so quickly and so vastly. And I think with that, the things that should have been set up in the beginning hadn't been, because people never knew it would become like this. We never knew that it would basically take over our lives and the world that we know. So I think any restrictions that are going to have any large effects are probably going to have to constrain the sites beyond what people are used to. And I don't know if people are going to be willing for that. Like, if Instagram's come on and say, we're only going to make it available for 4 hours a day, or we're going to really limit, like, people are going to be in uproar, because no one likes the restrictions once they've known the freedom. So I think it will be very
They will be in uproar, Sophie.
Yeah, they would be. People will be in uproar.
Riots up and down the street.
Yeah. I'm a little bit inclined to disagree with the idea that it's something that can't be controlled at this stage, because a few years ago, that Facebook, I think, had freely admitted that we had tried to filter out, and Twitter as well, had tried to deliberately filter out a lot of people who were doing white supremacist and homophobic and other forms of racist and other kinds of abuse that were targeting certain individuals, and deliberately striking them from the platform and making sure that they were deleted and taken down. The problem was that it took down a lot of conservative politicians. So the thing is, we know that they have the ability to exercise that level of control over who sees what and what makes it to the public at large. So that's just one of the reasons I'm inclined to disagree and say that for as big of a monster as social media has become, it is still not so big that the people in charge of it are not able to exercise control over it.
I think if I smiled anymore, I might have got a chapped lip. I was agreeing with every single thing that you said. I can't agree anymore. I was going to say all of those points. I actually do not believe that it is beyond the point where it cannot be controlled. I don't believe that for a second, because again, going off the conspiracy, I have heard that there are agents that can tune into your phone call conversations. If you're on if you're like doing webcam, etc., people are able to tap into it. Do not tell me that you can do these things, but you are not able to police these social media apps. I don't believe it. Using these social media apps, we are constantly being watched. Us engaging in these apps in our free time, they're using us as data. That's how they're able to advertise and use us as walking advertisements for their products. There's nothing that they can't do. They pick and choose what it is that they want to do. And that's what I don't agree with. I should actually be paid by Instagram, because the amount of people's back I have. I've seen people making a comment about someone else. It could be a celebrity, it might not be a celebrity. I could have just come across someone else's page. I am like a warrior, because if you come for somebody, you've come for me, and I'm for sure finna tell you about yourself. I got into an argument about somebody about Megan Thee Stallion, because this boy was saying that how she looked like a man and this and that. And I thought,
dear.
Who the hell are you? Who the hell are you to open your mouth and talk about someone else? If you don't like it, swipe away. You have the choice as to what you want to engage with. Now, I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but even if you were to just have a small team, let's just say, devise a small team that you put in different areas, Manchester, Manchester, London, Birmingham, etc., you get the picture. And these teams are actually designated to catch the trolls and be able to identify who they are, like you said, delete their platforms. I'm not even doing this 3 strikes, you're out. You get rude once you're out, because it has such a damaging effect on people. If we're looking at, for example, like Caroline Flack, as we're speaking about Chrissy Teigen, Taylor Swift has shouted from the rooftop how much slander she gets. Lori Harvey, the trending hashtag that she's for the streets. What is happening that is protecting these people? Why does Chrissy Teigen have to delete her Twitter? Because she feels that is what she needs to do to protect her peace of mind. Come on, Twitter, you have to do better, because if I can sit here, a 27-year-old, in my room, and I can protect Chrissy Teigen with my few words and my little platform, I'm inclined to believe that you could do way more than what I can. It's a choice. I don't think it's too big of a monster for them to control. I don't think they want to control it, because at the end of the day, these social media apps, they thrive off our insecurities. So if you keep going back to Instagram because you want to compare yourself to somebody else, at the end of the day, it's more engagement for Instagram. If you're hopping on Twitter because you want to radicalize somebody or push through all your hate campaigns, it's giving Twitter more campaigns, isn't it? I've never used Facebook, but the whole, oh, you haven't spoken to your mate in year 3 for 10 years, why don't you connect with someone? I've never used it for that. I have never used Facebook for that. I'm sure there are people who do use it for that, but the people who use it for bad are really starting to outweigh the good. And it's not to say, oh, well, you know, there's good and bad in everything. That's a very, very relaxed attitude that I think is dangerous. People need to pull up their socks and they need to be held accountable. Even if social media has become something else, you created it, so you put it in check, because I would be inclined to believe that if they were on the receiving end of these things, they would be the first ones to change the guidelines, to change the rules so that it suits them. So do the same for the consumers.
That's actually how Facebook got off the ground. Sorry, just really quickly, because a lot of people like to say that, oh, it's something that started out for good. No, it wasn't. Now, I can't say this for definite about any of the other social media platforms, but Facebook very deliberately started by Mark Zuckerberg because he wanted to be able to rate the attractiveness of his female classmates at university. So let's not act like social media was always this massive force for good or whatever, because even some of the people that invented it, their motives were not always that up and up.
I think if we're saying that, then we really are putting the onus on people to do what Chrissy Teigen, Thierry Henry have done then, to really delete themselves. Because if the people who are in charge of it aren't going to put any further sanctions in or do anything, then the answer really is for us to be very mindful about how we engage with it then, and to do the work that the company isn't going to. Because Chrissy Teigen has come out and said that the reason she left isn't because of the bullying and trolling. She said, she was like, it wasn't that specifically, but she was saying literally she felt like she was being classed as the clapback queen, and she's not like that, and she's a people pleaser, and she just felt like she was just kind of falling into this hole. So I don't know what the answer is really if the tech companies aren't going to do their role, because then it really does come down to us and the way that we're going to. So maybe you can, put in a timer, because you can put timer on your social media apps. That's what I've done. So I'm only allowed to go in it for a certain amount of day, and I try not to override it. But sometimes I do. But there's going to have to be things that we have to do.
Oh, 100%. And I agree with that, Sophie. Listen, I'm a big believer about disconnecting from social media. Like, you'll often, well, maybe more Sophie, because you've seen me, been on the show for a while. You'll often hear me say, "Oh, I'm taking a social media break. I'm taking a social media break." Like, I often just dip out when I feel like that platform is no longer serving me in the right way. Then I kind of just dip out. And a part of that is I guess to make my social media the most healthiest space, like, I'm specific about the people that I follow. I'm specific about the kind of feeds I have. Like, I'm very intentional on my social media so that I'm curating a space that I feel is healthy and balanced. And I feel like but by nature, even if you curate it that way, things are going to creep in. You have explore pages, you have hashtags, things are going to come before your site that you probably didn't want before your site. And I think if you get to a place where you're like, you know what, I actually have to disconnect. You have to disconnect. And whenever I tell people disconnect, people are usually like, yeah, I took a social media break for a day. I always tell people take weeks, because you almost have to deprogram yourself from the social media. Like, they've got to a point where all my news was coming from social media. So when I came off social media, I was like, okay, but I want to figure out how the world is working. But then I'd go to Twitter and I'd be like, actually, no, there's actual news apps that you can go on and you can find the news there. It's like, you have to be so deliberate and careful about your social media use, because even if you're not the victim of bullying, or you're not being the person that's going out to bully others, there are still a lot of negativities on social media that if you constantly feed into yourself, it becomes an unhealthy space. So that's why I'm a big believer in taking a break and just disengaging. Now, of course, there's things that I've done on my end to make things purposeful, but there's things that Twitter has done. Like, Twitter's my social media of choice, and it's things like blocking words or muting people. There's like several things I've done, several functions that they have that I've kind of encompassed to help make sure that my feed is nice and healthy. However, as I said, it doesn't capture everything, but I do think, like, although the companies need to do a lot, they do have a few tools available that you can take up and use and make your social media a bit more intentional, so you don't have to get in fights. No offense, but I mean, don't get into words of war.
I completely agree with what you're saying, Anissa, because I'm a big believer in taking breaks as well.
Yeah.
And I think this is where it comes into, like, people's areas of development and their areas of strength. Because, like I said, the app was never designed to disconnect. If anything, it's just something that pulls you in further and further. So what about people who actually are not able to disconnect? And it's not because that they're not able to take responsibility for their own mental health. It is because the dangerous effects of the app is being shown on these people. That's why they're not able to disconnect. So what happens then? And I'm not saying that these companies need to take 100% ownership of these social media platforms, but at the end of the day, it's as simple to me as, if you created something, you should be able to police it. And I know that when other people use it, it morphs into something else. But I think these companies are really getting to slide at the expense of people. If social media is at the cause of poor mental health, suicide rates, hate campaigns, rationalization, that is some really big effects. I think it takes more than somebody just saying, you know what, I'm going to disconnect. Because having these features where you can block out certain topics and feeds, I know exactly what you're talking about, Anissa.
Yeah.
What it can do to certain individuals is it's it's my way. You're curating your own environment. And if you go, I'm very much the same. I get majority of my news from social media. If you do that, what happens is, you know, like how your voice can hear. So let's say you're talking about Cadbury's chocolate, and then Cadbury's chocolate pops up on your phone. Depending on where you sit on the fence with global warming, if you're somebody who believes in global warming or you're somebody who doesn't believe in global warming, the newsfeed that you get is very different depending on your beliefs and the conversations that you've had. That is so dangerous, because if I kept saying that I don't believe in social media, etc., etc., your phone can actually send you updates of, oh, just a friendly reminder that there's actually a campaign going on down the 20 miles from you, blah, blah, blah. Because that's my version of the truth, and that's what I'm connecting with. When I go out there and I'm interacting with people, I'm thinking, this person's an idiot. How can you believe that global warming isn't real when my Twitter's telling me it's real, my Instagram is telling me it's real, my Snapchat is telling me it's real? It brings real life problems, because social media is not just, it's on my phone, put it away. It infiltrates into your life. It's curated into our culture now. Social media is part of our lives. So it's not a box that you can close. It infiltrates into every aspect of our life. So even when you have disconnected from social media, if you have been affected negatively, it doesn't just end there. It goes into all walks of life. And this is why I feel like these companies need to take more responsibility. If you are preying on young audiences, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 pluswards, they're very impressionable. How can we say, oh yeah, they should take more responsibility? Or, oh yeah, it's their parents' responsibility. Are parents going to police their kids 24 hours of the day? No, these companies have to take responsibility.
Oh, I agree with the majority of that. Like, I definitely think when it comes to kids and everything, but I don't know if you guys watched the Caroline Flack documentary. Like, I went and watched it, and like, she was dealing with some mental health issues that didn't just originate from social media. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you heard her mum and her sister talking, these were things that were going on in her life from before social media even came about. And I think saying that, I agree that social media has become a bit of a beast, but I don't know if we can lay the blame entirely on social media. Like, there has to be a level of onus that people, and for Caroline Flack, I think it was very difficult, because for her, from what her mother said, she wasn't someone who wanted to talk about the things that she was going through and reach out for help, because there was a certain level of shame there that she seemed to experience. And I think there needs to be a willingness or the ability to reach out to services and things like that, because I think what social media can do is prey on insecurities, prey on things, on minds that aren't in the healthiest of conditions. But saying that it's responsible for like everything, I feel very uncomfortable with that as well. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but yeah, more policing does need to happen.
Yeah, and I really agree with you, Sophie, because for as much as we like to say that social media is this great big beast and everything else, it's not the originator of a lot of these problems. It's just the amplifier. So the thing is, let me dial it back to something more like benign. That instinct we have to compare ourselves. We've had that instinct for as long as we've been around. Instagram doesn't make you want to compare yourself. That's a natural instinct we have. It's just that Instagram is able to make that instinct permeate into more aspects of your day and more minutes of your life, where previously you would have had to actually go and interact with the person to then get that cycle of thoughts going. Now you just open your phone and bam, there it is, assaulting you, you know? And that's, again, I don't know what the answer is, because it is both more policing needs to happen, but also we need to apply a lot more social pressure, both on social media platforms and also of ourselves, and recognize, hey, this is an instinct that we are all party to. This is an instinct we all have. We need to be cognizant of that.
Oh, guys, I feel like we're falling on both sides of the fence here, and I don't know if anyone's ever going to agree, but we don't have any more time to talk about it, because we've come to another end of an episode for Ethnically Speaking. Thank you for watching and listening, but help us to keep the conversation going. We want to know what you think. Do social media companies need to do more to protect people from bullying and harassing on their platforms? Let us know your answers down below in the comments, and if you want a summary of everything we've talked about today, head on over to highly-melaningroup.com/ES058. The link will be in the description. And if you've been watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell and give us a thumbs up so you don't miss a single thing. We're going to be seeing you again on Monday, where we will be talking about whether it's okay for certain types of men to cheat on their partners. We're not pulling any punches with that episode, so make sure you tune in. But until the next time, make sure you wear your mask, wash your hands, keep your distance, and as always, stay safe.